Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. Yes, it's a job, apparently. It's been my job since 2016 as a full-time speaker, sharing the lived experience of mental health. Now, of that title, the inspirational part is really important. I clearly define in any organization the difference between mental illness and mental health. Really important. Everybody has mental health, and like everything, once it's exercised, we can make positive impacts and positive inroads into our mental health. So that's the inspirational part, is where personal development meets mental health. That's kind of what I do. The second element of that is around the lived experience. Now, for me, lived experience is the best engagement tool to take organizations from the problem of mental health to the solution, but I'm not the solution by any stretch. You'll be hearing from solution providers such as Leanne tomorrow. You've got Donna, who's in the room today as well, and also Ben, who has a platform over the upcoming sessions. But for me, all I do is to drive engagement. Now, for reasons which will become a little bit clearer later on, I'm taking a little bit of a different approach to this, because some of you would have heard some of this before, but today I'm going to share how I deliver this and why I deliver this. And I think it's really important, and it really kind of showcases how lived experience can really work to drive engagement. Not exclusively men, but especially men have a real challenge with engaging with mental health and well-being initiatives, because they feel like they're being fixed. They feel like it's a classroom environment. And actually, generally, people don't want to be fixed. They just want to be heard. We'll come on to that. So a bit of context. Context is massive. Context, when you lose context in any relationship, personally or professionally, that's where relationships break down. You need to explain to people why you are there in front of them, talking to them about what you're talking to them about. In any kind of dynamic, that works brilliantly. So I share with people that I've worked with BBC, global media, panel events. I'm a mental health first aider, and work with organisations such as Time to Change. I'm also the agony uncle for Accounting Web. Got 50,000 anxious accountants writing to me every month. If you want to test whether your anxiety is fixed or not, it's a really good test. But I deliver this stuff all over the world. And the interesting thing is, in the UK, we have a real problem that we have been generationally and culturally brought up to believe that self-care is selfish. Most of you, when you are taking time for yourself, will feel guilt. You will feel like you need to ask for permission or explain yourself. But actually, if we don't do that, that's where things like burnout and breakdown can really happen. Forging People, I throw this in purely because it's the name of my business. Forging People clearly means that it takes people from adversity to excitement. Your biggest challenges creates energy. Your biggest challenges creates a dynamic. And actually, when that's channeled in the right way, it can create something really exciting. Without those adversities you've lived through, at least you've survived them because you're here. Most of the time we thrive through things. This is a great example of the pandemic right now. You'll be making lots of learnings and lessons along the way, and you'll implement them to be smarter and stronger and happier coming away from there. And this is Tula. She's my Shih Tzu. If you hear barking, it's not me, it's her. I'm hoping she's going to be good today. She's being looked after today. Claire's in the house, is good. So what I then go on to tell people and share with audiences and businesses is kind of my story. Now, my story, as some of you guys will know, is I had mental illness as a child. I had obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and I'm 42 now. I've had a hard life. So back in the day, the treatment for OCD was just 8 weeks of talking therapy. Now, as much as I love talking therapy, it's not a fix for OCD by any stretch of the imagination. So because it went largely I guess, mistreated, it then evolved into teenage life as GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When I start talking about GAD to people, a lot of people will recognize the signs in this without even knowing it was a thing. So it could be in adult life that you seek your accountability, your worth and your value in the opinions of other people. It could be that you constantly ruminate on things that have gone wrong, events that have gone wrong, conversations that have gone wrong, and then feeling those feelings of guilt and anxiety, so closely linked, could be personal relationships, professional relationships. Basically, you stay on that hamster wheel of anxiety, and as soon as one thing stops, something else jumps straight in. And you basically run on high anxiety, you run on high nerves. And I see that a lot in my corporate stuff that I do. It's no surprise that most of the industries that I work in, probably all of the industries I work in, are high pressure environments. Contact centers, law firms, construction, financial services, you name it. They have a they who leave first lose approach. And I think that's the problem. So the reason I share that with people is to make sure that people understand that you need to start to ask yourself questions. We have all the answers, we just don't ask ourselves the right questions. And if we do, we can sometimes be afraid of the truth. Now, I'll come on to that later as well. So I shared that with people, I share that GAD, and then I will explain how that looked in education, in school, because the reason I go back that long to showcase that to people is because we need to understand that most of our conditioning in adult life comes from our youth, comes from our formative years. We think that broken people come from broken environments, and that can absolutely be true, but also it can absolutely not be true. This is no X Factor sob story. I come from a very loving family, and I have a loving family, but stuff still goes wrong along the way. Now in school, that I was head prefect, top grades in every school. So actually from the outside looking in, and you'll see this in the corporate environment as well, I was successful, but actually I was just managing high anxiety. My way of dealing with that was to build a mechanism which involved people pleasing at a very early age. So it could be that I was in every single clique. It could be that I would, again, seek my worth, my value from the opinions of other people, and I thrived off of that, and I got really hurt if people didn't like me. So you kind of end up in that middle zone of just trying to keep everybody very beige kind of existence. But when I think about my 3 biggest challenges in adult life, I can absolutely trace them back to those times. And that's why I throw that into my talks to organizations. It's because we need to start to look back to take a step forward. That my 3 biggest challenges, of course, anxiety. It's the reason why I'm talking here to you and everywhere else that I've spoken about this stuff. I come from a family that have a history of anxiety. It's a learned behavior. I've learned how to react to things that happen. Again, not with any cruel intent whatsoever, but it's a learned mechanism. The second thing is that weight and body image and weight loss has been a huge challenge for me and those who have seen me in person, as a 6'4", 20-odd stone guy. I ain't a small dude. However, what I've done is that when I've looked back is in between feeding me rounds of sandwiches, and as much as I love them and miss them every day, my grandparents would say, he's a big lad, he loves his food. I am a big lad, I love my food. I've got a bit of brand on it now, so I'm kind of screwed. However, that's the reason why it's taken that kind of impact on me. I've associated the good with something which actually eventually could be quite destructive. The third thing, and it's only something I started sharing last year, so actually some of you guys may not have heard this at all, that I actually worked out I've got a very bad relationship with alcohol. That's interesting because I carried that for a long time without even knowing it. And the reason I throw that in is because A, it's another taboo subject that people just don't talk about. B, because we think that if we have a problem with alcohol, we're an alcoholic. Absolutely, I wasn't, and I'm not an alcoholic. However, what I worked out was I had a bad relationship. How that happened was that I was taken into hospital with a ridiculously high blood pressure. After lots of scans and tests and stuff, they actually found I've got a big heart. So, Mr. Elston, you've got a very big heart. I said, thank you very much. So no, it's not a good thing. I went, okay. And the medication that they put me on to correct this hereditary thing meant that I couldn't drink alcohol. It would nullify the effects of the medication. So, of course, I stopped drinking. And it was really interesting that as time went on, people close to me, friends in social situations were saying like how much better I was, how much calmer I was, maybe less aggressive in those kind of situations. Just really strange things were happening that I just felt better. So a lot of the time we can carry our problems without even questioning. So again, the reason why I share that with people is to actually make them feel comfortable to start to make those questions to themselves. To put them in a place that, because it's set to the context of my story, they feel safe to engage in that themselves. It's the same reason why people share things with me they wouldn't even share with their GP. So I'm very good at active signposting. So that mechanism then worked so well, I took it into my corporate life. So what I then explained is that about the reasons why people get to that position of burnout and breakdown. So for me, it was the same as a C all over the place. And the reason, again, I mentioned that burnout or breakdown or meltdown, everyone's got a different word for that, by the way. And a lot of people would have experienced this without even knowing about it. It's that bit when you say, I'm done with this, I'm done with that, I'm done with her, I'm done with him, whatever that thing is, you just say, I'm done. For me, the reason why people get to that, especially in a professional environment, is because they wear a mask. They try and be what people want to see in them. They try and be what situations demand of them, but they sure don't damn show themselves. Because when they show themselves, we are led to believe, we have been brought up professionally and also personally to believe that people will take a shot at us, that we are going to be dismissed and judged and not loved, and all these things that we keep telling ourselves. If you think about the things, even at 42, growing up, I was told, man up, stiff upper lip, that kind of stuff. We don't share our stuff. So it's really hard to break that conditioning. And depending on your upbringing, it may even be more difficult than that if actually it was very, very closed environment. I come from a really open family, and it was still difficult for me to start talking about that stuff. The second reason why people get to that point is because they will fill up their work diaries with all their work stuff, and then they will fill up the rest of their diaries, all their family commitments, but actually, where do you feature in your own life? That question really throws people when I ask it directly to the camera, as it is in the minute. Because if you looked at your diary or your calendar now, is there a space in your day that's exclusively for you, ring-fenced for you to rest and recover and recharge and go again tomorrow? Trust me, you can only run for so long before you stop. And the worrying thing is that this will go by completely under the radar. Nobody even questions the fact that they're completely either running on empty or running on high anxiety all the time. But running on high anxiety in a professional background, in a corporate environment, actually can drive you to be successful as well. And that's the other thing, is a distinguishing thing between success and actually how your mental health is. That's the reason why I got to my breakdown point 8 years ago now. I've been to a business networking meeting. I share what happened. I also share the fact that people think the worst thing about that point in any person's life is about anger and pain. And actually, it's not. The worst thing is feeling absolutely nothing at all. It's living under a haze, because to cut off feeling hate, you cut off feeling love. To cut off feeling bad, you cut off feeling good. You can't have one without the other. So the worst thing absolutely is feeling nothing at all. And for me, that's the most dangerous part that anybody can reach. It's one of the signs that I absolutely look out for when I'm chatting to people. That's when people lose hope, or the hope of something better, that's when it starts to become quite dark for me. Now, that was the point I reached. I will then explain how speaking helped me. So 2 weeks after that event, that breakdown, I actually stood up at the networking meeting and I explained what had happened before. I spoke about mental illness and OCD in children and stuff, and the signs and stuff. It was complete brain dump. It was cheap therapy. It literally was. It's 15 quid including breakfast. It's outside of a Premier Inn, you see. If I knew I was talking about this stuff for a living now, I would have gone with Hilton or someone more exclusive, try and get a deal out of it. Lenny Henry was nowhere to be seen either, which is kind of, anyway. So I'll start to try to make a really heavy point lighter. And it's intentionally done that way because actually when you make a heavy point lighter, it becomes more absorbable for people. They don't get defensive about it. That is for me, when I'm delivering that part of the talk, that's the bit that people can get really kind of over defensive or uncomfortable. So that's how I deliver that. I throw in humor to change that. And again, the reason why I'm explaining this actually is a really good mechanism to use with teams that you look after as well. So from that point, I then go on to explain how that day changed my life. How vulnerability, when we practice vulnerability as a daily practice, we become bulletproof. Because suddenly everything's out there, no one has anything on us, we're just living authentically and speaking our mind, which actually is a learned behavior. It doesn't happen overnight, trust me. Because on that day, when I finished that talk, which was terrible, and I was shaking and crying and stuff, that everybody in that room queued up to give me their support. And everybody in that room queued up to give me a hug. I love hugs and I miss hugs. Has to be said. And for the South Wales contingent, it's cookies. There you go. And the third thing that changed my life forever was this. It was the fact that suddenly it wasn't about me anymore. And this is where I start to then open it out to more audience-directed stuff. What I've done is to set the scene. What I've done is to take a really heavy, dark, taboo subject, make it a little lighter, a bit more consumable, then people can start to ask those questions. And I'll then go on to explain that's why I'm there in front of them speaking. So over lockdown and this kind of pandemic situation, I've used different kind of ways of approaching the situation to try and tailor it to where people are. And these are the things coming up now that I usually address with audiences. Again, it's really worth knowing if you're managing teams about kind of these kind of things. Now, this that you see in front of you is an old anxiety mechanism. This is how I recover from any situation, is to acknowledge, then survive, then evolve. And like everything, it's a great learning curve. So for me, if you look at lockdown as the example, and I was talking to Donna about this just before we started, If you look at the business through lockdown, and again, I use the business as an example because it's safer to start to test stuff with people, that I had to acknowledge very, very early on, this is brutal. There's no way of dressing this up. And I think that a lot of people are waiting to kind of start, or kind of maybe still hiding in that kind of mode, because they think they need to know where they're going to make a start. But actually you don't. You just need to know that where you are now is somewhere that you don't want to be. And that's enough to give you the motivation and the catalyst for change. And once you move on from that point, you can then go into survival mode. And whoever you meet, including yourselves, will be in one of these three camps right now. Survival mode is where it starts to move from anxiety into problem solving. Okay, so how long can I last without any income? That was the question I was asking. How long can I last without any heart medication, potentially? We didn't know the effects of getting medication and things like that. Toilet rolls was the other one, I think, was the one that was going on at the time. Lots of different things that were running out of stock, flour and eggs, that kind of stuff. Survival mode is basically that old adage of we have what we hold. That's kind of the point of this bit. How long can we survive for exactly where we are now? Then when you worked out that you're somewhere where you don't want to be and how long you could be there for, then you've got to start to the foundations, the skeleton of a goal. So this is where I start to bring the tone, the conversation into mental health, into personal development from mental illness and mental health. Empowering people and hopefully inspiring people to think that wherever you are right now, the energy that creates, whether it's negative or positive, can actually be a tremendous force for good if it's pushed in the right direction. And that tends to catch people because everyone's got different adversities, everyone's got different challenges. Once you've worked out how long you can survive for, you can then go into evolution mode. Now that's where it gets exciting. That's where we start to evolve. That's where we take all the learnings of all the experiences we've had, negative or positive, whatever they may be, and we take that, we turn it into something better. So in the simplest kind of example would be that all of my business is now done online. Speaking, coaching, all the stuff that I do is online, fully online. So that's a really good example of evolution. But along the way, there's been lots of different changes and evolving from lots of learnings that we all pick up, and personally and professionally, of course. One of the big things I've majored on, and I recommend this again to anybody who manages teams, is to look at setting boundaries and to look at managing expectations. So what do I mean by setting boundaries? I've met a lot of people in different states of undress and positions over the past kind of month on lockdown on a Zoom screen. And because a lot of people actually were just kind of rolling out of bed onto the laptop and then rolling back again at the end of the day. They created an hour of lethargy. So having a really positive self-care routine really helps. I'll come on to that shortly. So things like setting your boundaries on making sure that you sometimes have the courage to ask for your own space. Sometimes you need to have your own space, a sanity check every single day. Especially if you're in a busy household, you've got kids and lots of different things, you need to have that own space to make sure that you reset yourself and recover. So boundaries takes a whole kind of manner of things that I looked into depending on where we were in lockdown at the time. The other thing I talk about is managing expectations. Now, the work I do as an agony uncle for the accounting magazine is a great example. So Boris and Rishi would announce the latest tax breaks, the latest initiatives, and within 30 seconds, their clients would be on the phone to them saying, right, okay, how do I apply for this? What are you going to do for it? They've literally watched the same press conference as the client. But what it is creating anxiety in the client, and it's a transferal of negative energy onto the supplier, onto the trusted source. So from the accountant's point of view, they had to manage expectations. Okay, what can people expect from me right now? But also, what can people expect from me right now? And I think given your roles within your organizations, and even personally as well, this works the same. If your kind of boundaries, if your situation has changed, if you're going to need a greater response time, if you're going to need more support, start to manage those expectations by being upfront about those things. So instead of having a 24-hour email return policy, I'll have a 48-hour email return policy. Start to create those little buffer zones so actually it takes the pressure off of you. And that can change, that can evolve week on week. But managing expectations is huge. And especially right at the start, when I first started talking about this stuff in lockdown, expectations were all over the place because a lot of people, even right now, are acting from a position of fear. Quite rightly, I guess, that everyone has an underlying feeling of dread that creates anxiety, creates fear. So people may be acting differently to how they would be outside of the situation. So we need to match that with compassion, but also having the courage, and it does take courage to ask for your expectations to be and your boundaries to be respected. So this is Mark Twain. Some of the worst things in my life never actually happened. The biggest single challenge right now is constant assumption. People are assuming the outcome to everything. So I said, me and Emma were chatting about this just before, that look, we're all bigger picture kind of people as humans, especially in business, that we like to start with the end in mind, but actually that's just not an option. The world's greatest minds don't know what's happening right now, even when it's going to end. So who are we to take a stab at that? And actually that thing that we all become a bit tired of, that Groundhog Day, actually that could be our superpower. That could be the biggest positive tool we have. Because anxiety to me was regret from the past or fear of the future. Very rarely was it today. I think today pretty much we can manage anything that comes our way. It's when we start to think too far either way, that's where it starts to create a lot of problems. So again, by addressing this with people, they start to see that actually it's not just about what anxiety is. I leave that to the professionals, like Leanne, like Donna. I leave that to them, as solution providers, to fix that. But for me, all I'm trying to raise awareness of is what anxiety does. So it's the things that we don't necessarily attribute anxiety to, like the opportunities we go for, like the relationships we choose and the ones we choose to stay in, like those promotions we may go for and the ones we hold ourselves back from. Basically how it stops us living a life on our terms, how it keeps us in our comfort zone. To me, that's the most debilitating thing that anxiety creates, is limitations. And let's take reincarnation off the table here, just in case. If we get one go round at this, we want to make sure it's our go round. And I think that's the biggest kind of sadness for me, is it takes away choice. The first thing we sacrifice, the first thing anybody sacrifices when they struggle with mental health, when they struggle with low self-esteem, low self-confidence, is choice. But that's the only thing that we have. We cannot control the uncontrollable. We cannot control how people act and react. All we have power over are our thoughts and actions, our choice. And combined with what you'll be learning tomorrow about resilience, those are the things that we need to go forward on. But people get caught up either way, either in the past or the future, far too often. And including myself, if I am struggling, I will go back to that kind of looking too far ahead or too far back mechanism. But again, it's a great example. I didn't do that intentionally, weirdly, but I use this space still as therapy space, because actually if it pops in my head, I'll just say it and work it out for myself in front of you. And again, that then people know that it's authentic. People know when you're honest with people, and that disarming truth thing that some of you guys have heard me talking about, like when I stand up in front of 10,000 people at the XL London, when it wasn't the Nightingale Hospital, unfortunately. The first thing I'll say is, I am anxious right now. Who the hell wouldn't be? I'm just about to bare my soul to 10,000 accountants. Of course I'm anxious. But the process of me telling them that means that they know it's authentic and they want to support you. Nobody wants you to fail. From my point of view, when it's out of me and onto them, I'm not anxious about it anymore. So use that disarming truth and vulnerability for those awkward conversations that you're going to have. Again, it's been a great period to review and evolve. Decisions I've made over lockdown, I've come off of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. What I found was, as my new kind of self-care routine helped me to get stronger, actually what I was finding was the things that made me feel the opposite, negative, were really starting to stand out. And I could pick up my phone and scroll on Facebook and feel like crap within minutes. And that kind of groundswell of compassion that we all had at the start of lockdown, and we did, mostly, it's changed. And I think there's been a groundswell of frustration and toxicity a lot since. There's been big world issues going on, not just the pandemic. You've got bad politics, you've got assassinations, you've got racism, you've got lots of different things going on as well. And it's just reached that kind of bubbling point where actually, as much as I love social media, and as you guys who've known me for a few years now know, I do love social media. The platforms are great. However, for me, I'm out. Not right now. I'm not saying never, but not right now. As I stay on LinkedIn, because obviously commercially it makes sense. I'm on a YouTube channel, but I made a choice. And actually, I must say, it's really nice on the other side. No pings and beeps and whistles and notifications at all hours of the day. It's really cool. However, that may not be forever, but we need to have the courage to make sure we're doing what we need to do right now to get us through. Sometimes we are somewhere where we don't want to be, and most of us, I guess, are not in a position where we want to be right now, not fully. but we know we need to come through this. So we need to do what we need to do to get through. So again, a lot of these decisions you can make temporarily, you can make short term, it's not a problem. I think the problem we have with bigger picture thinkers is we think if we make a decision now, then that's it. I'm not going to have to go back. We can start to make these things. With this enforced distance you've got from people and environments, it's a great time to start to make these reviews, start to really have that gut feeling about what's good for you and who's good for you and who's not good for you and what's not good for you, and actually start to make those decisions and try to shape your life personally and professionally the way that you want to shape it. One of the big things that I focus on, as some of you guys will know, is recovery. How do you recharge? How do you recover? And firstly, there's no fix-all. It's really important. For me, for those fans of personal development, if you read a book or listen to a podcast, then every one of them, they're like diets, that they want you to do it their way or you're a bad human being. That's kind of how it makes you feel. But actually, for me, you read a book, you get one line of that book that really jumps out at you, you put it in your own playbook. You know what's good for you, you know what you love. And actually, if you don't, then that's a question you should ask yourself. If I gave you 2 hours now to go and do something you love, you should know what you would do, what would lift your soul. The caveat is it cannot include anybody else. If we start to put the happiness in the hands of other people with the ebb and flow of two people's life, it's difficult enough being at the ebb and flow of one person's life at the moment, let alone two people's lives. So if I said to you that, you should know what to do, music or hobbies or sports. And by the way, if you like Morrissey and the Smiths, it works the other way, it brings you straight down as well. But know what's good for you. What do you love to do? Some of you will know this, but I used to ask this question differently. I said, what do you love to do when no one's looking? That's some really weird answers. Never do a gig in Germany, that's all I'm going to say. Anyway, if you don't know what you're going to be doing to recharge, this is what you need to do. If an introvert recharges in the company of others, it's another bit that I tend to go into. I tell people that I'm an introvert, and I am. I recharge in my own company. That's how I kind of get my energy back. An extrovert recharges in the company of others. So an extrovert in lockdown may have been really struggling. And understanding that, and understanding that we need to take this kind of human approach to bringing people back, means that we kind of take away that broad brushstroke way of trying to fix people. And if you're still struggling with this, if you're still struggling with what you love to do, think about what you wanted to be as a kid before real life got in the way. That one job you really wanted to do. If you've lost the emotions of that, there's a part of your soul crying out for this. So the most popular answer I get is an astronaut. Second is archaeologist for some reason. Astronaut. So you think about the job of being an astronaut, it's rubbish. You get trained for 10 years, shot up in the sky for a week, shot back down at very high speed, high risk of death, probably wouldn't apply for that. Think about the job of an astronaut through the eyes of a teenager. You've got travel and discovery and excitement and adventure. You'd apply for that. And if you haven't got those things, those feelings, those emotions in your life right now, bring them back into your hobbies, bring them back into your pastimes. Your energy will shoot up, I promise you. Works so well. Even the simple things. My nephew had Lego for Christmas. I played with it more than he did. It really took me back. It's really cool. So if you are in a position of looking after people, the reason I shared it with you today, the way that I have, is because actually one of the decisions I've made over the past week is I'm going to be hanging up my cap as a speaker on mental health as the year closes. So when it comes to January, I will no longer be doing this. I'm focusing on the speaking coaching stuff. And the reason why I've taken that decision, if I'm honest, what I found is kind of, I always considered end of part one was when I first stood on stage at Excel London. That got me from the point of breakdown to there. For me, I feel like this is now the end of part two. It's really heavy to work in emotion constantly, especially when it's an emotion from your own journey, from your own story. It's taken longer and longer to recover. So I've actually made a decision to do that. So huge decision for me. But again, this is a great example. And the reason I wanted to share is because I want you to know the insights and the power of sharing lived experience, not just from me, from anybody, but also because I think you experience this more if you've been through challenges yourself. But whatever's happening right now, your mental health needs to take absolute priority. If I'm being honest, 80% of my income as a business is from speaking at the moment. This is going to be potentially a really interesting decision, but actually that's how much I prioritize my mental health nowadays. So think about that situation. And if you're managing teams, just know this. Essentially in life, people just want to be heard and they want to be understood. That's it. It's nothing magic. There's no deeper than that. So I think our responsibility, but we have this human flaw really, that we try and fix everybody. Unless you're a medical professional, unless you're a solution bringer, that people aren't coming to you to be fixed, they're coming to you to be heard. And if you can actively listen to somebody, put down the phone, switch off your laptop, actively listen to what people are saying, most of the time they will go and find their own way forward. So I think our responsibility as normal people, non-medical professionals, non-practitioners, our responsibility starts and ends with active signposting. Getting very, very good at knowing how you can direct people without taking on the burden and responsibility of the people that are sharing with you. If you are sharing with 20 people that are struggling, you've got 21 burdens on you. Because the reason why we get into a position of management or leadership, the reason why people become mental health first aiders is because they've got experience of bad mental health before. They've got experience of being badly led before, badly managed before, and they want to do something about it. The byproduct of that is actually, by default, you're more sensitive to take on the burdens of other people. So it's kind of like a real, like, weird human flaw that by being a nice, sensitive, caring person, you will end up taking more of the burden. And remember that transferal of anxiety, that's kind of what's going on. So if you start to use that self-protection, you can lead and effectively manage more easily, but also with more greater impact. So know things like your employee assistance programs, know things like the counselling services you may offer, know things about like the amazing massages from Donna, or the solution providers like Leanne, and also from Ben, who've got a platform for mental health stuff. Lots of different things that you can do. Just get good at knowing where this stuff is. Things like Mind have an urgent help button. Time to Change have lots of different materials you can freely access to promote positive mental health in the workplace. So many different things, you know. It's just a case of knowing them. So actually, when somebody shares with you, you've done all you can morally. You can sleep well, you can manage well without taking on that burden yourself. I'm talking to a lot of people at the moment, especially in the HR kind of world or capacity, where they're having conversations around redundancy, they're having conversations around furlough, which actually, because of the emotion involved, are really quite challenging. However, a great way of kind of taking on those challenges is to remember to be human and treat people like humans. There's not going to be one fix, or there's not going to be one way of getting everybody back to work. There's not going to be one way of making everybody happy again. What you need to remember is it's a case by case, a human by human basis. Have those conversations with people. Find out what really makes them tick. And if you want to create a deeper relationship with somebody you're talking to, give a little bit of yourself. Show some vulnerability, show some empathy, show some kindness and compassion, and you will get that back. Even in the most heated conversations, you will get that back. It's when we stop, when we stop to show the human, people feel like they're on the receiving end of a tool from the company, not another human being just doing the best that they can. So, not for today, because this is a shorter session, but these are some of the other things I go into. From that lived experience perspective, really, really important. I'm always stressing, not a medical professional, I'm not fixing anybody, I'm not even offering advice. What I'm sharing are insights and learnings that have worked for me, but hopefully they may work for you, or they may inspire some change that you've been meaning to make. The two biggest challenges in most organizations that I work with, based on feedback that I get away from those sessions, are change and procrastination. Change is inevitable. So that's nothing we can do with that. What we can do is build resilience, and Leanne will be talking about that tomorrow. The second thing, procrastination, that's absolutely under our control. We need to work out the reason why we procrastinate on things, because when we procrastinate, we build up a tidal wave of anxiety, and it's going to happen when you put something off. You need to do that thing. Most of the time, it's because we don't want to do something, or we're scared of doing something. But actually, really, essentially, most of the time, it's because you haven't got the courage, conviction, and confidence in what you are doing, because we think that we're going to get shot at. Again, it's a narrative thing. When we finish that project, it's going to be judged and potentially dismissed and critiqued. Actually, it's really safe not doing it. So start to have those conversations with yourself. Any Trekkies in the room? Probably just me today, but Jean-Luc Picard, Next Generation. We make all of these plans, and the one thing I always try to leave people with, and the reason why I make myself so successful afterwards, is because we make all these plans, but do we actually go on them? Plans are just plans, are just thoughts, and as long as they stay in our head. But do we actually go on them? And the real reasons why we hold back, because of not wishing to offend people, or people pleasing, because of being judged or critiqued or dismissed or not loved or judged. That exercise that I've shared with some of you, which I'll share again now, is really, really powerful, but it's very full on. It's called question everything. Wake up tomorrow morning and question everything you do and everything you say. It's so full on, but it's a great exercise. You really get to know each other. Remember, we have all the answers. We just don't ask ourselves the right questions. So why do you wake up at this time? Could you do with more sleep or less sleep? Most of the time, it's because we've always got up at that time. Why do you wake up next to them? Maybe there's a question you haven't asked in a while. And again, the reason, I'll be honest, I've never explained why I do that. The reason why I throw that question in is because sometimes it gets a laugh. Sometimes it's just prickly. So it makes people a little bit more kind of accepting of what you're going to say next. But mainly it's to highlight the areas of our life that we kind of ring fence, that we don't allow us to question those things. If we have too many aspects of our life that remain unquestioned, we end up going on the same template all the time. As my nan used to say, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got, that kind of stuff. We always run on our habits. In terms of narrative, very simply, if you're not feeling life right now, you may say to yourself, I am rubbish. And that's in the first person. Absolutely, that's you. However, and I learned this from a psychologist I was on a BBC panel with going back 2-3 years ago now, that most of the time we will say to ourselves, you are rubbish. We speak to ourselves in the third person. Now, worryingly, and I was really scared when I learned this, that's what somebody else has told us enough for it to become our conditioning. And I think that's the reason why I've always finished kind of this section with, there's an American author called Jim Rohn who says you're the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most. And I'm not going to go any further on that. I'll just leave you with that question and see if you're happy with the result of that or not. And of course, being a country music fan, I always got to finish with a country music quote. And a lot of you know this by now, every storm runs out of rain. Not only is it a great quote, it's a great song. It's not about losing your doggy and misses like most country music, to be fair. But right now, I think for me, it's knowing that every storm does run out of rain. And at the minute, we don't know where we are in this storm, but we know it will pass, like every other storm that you've lived through. And you have lived through, at least survived. Most of the time we thrive through. Most of the time that those pressures, the negative experiences, the challenges, the things that push us have actually drove us to be smarter and stronger and happier after the event. We just don't see it at the time. So if that's you, just know, like I said, it's when people lose hope or the hope of something better, that's when it starts to become quite a dangerous place. But if somebody comes to you, your responsibility is this. It could be the only time they decide to open up to anybody. But all they want to do is be heard and understood and get good at active signposting. And then as your responsibility, that's it. The rest of the burden is not yours. The rest of the burden's on them. And most of the time they will find their own way forward. But now more than ever, we just don't feel heard. And that's me. So I'm going to take it back to the room now. If you want to reach me, it's nick@nickelston.com. I've got an active YouTube channel, and if we're not connected on LinkedIn, please do. Yeah, thank you very much for joining my open therapy session. I really enjoyed doing that little twist on it because I've never explained to an audience before why I do what I do and how I do it. But hopefully you can see it's not the main theme that's the driver. It's the little bits in between. It's the added humor, added questioning, that kind of stuff. And if you can start to incorporate that into your work in terms of your teams and the people that you manage, it has a massive difference because most of the time we follow this template of what to say all the time. We feel it's the same with our conditioning. When I was in my corporate life, that I didn't think if I was wearing a suit and tie, if I wasn't wearing that, I wouldn't be taken seriously. And when I first started speaking, as you look back to my early stuff, I had a kind of a hybrid, a waistcoat, a shirt and trousers. There's a hybrid between this and where I was. But that conditioning takes over, and it takes a long time to break conditioning down. So I hope that's been useful for you. I'm going to throw it back to Emma now and take any questions if you so wish. Thank you. Just that introverted sigh is like every time.
Oh, thank you so much, Nick. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Emma.
Loads of notes again as well, and I've heard you a few times now, and for me, I just pick new stuff up every single time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm really interested to get some feedback from you guys. I appreciate that we're slightly over time, but any questions that anyone wants to ask Nick now, then feel free, or pop a chat, a message in the chat box, or you can email us as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in actually, Nick, if you don't mind. Because like Emma, I've seen you speak several times, knew you when you were corporate life before all this messing around. And one thing I know you mentioned and you always pick up on is that yourself, you put on a sort of front. You know, you push to be at the front to cover up what you were feeling. So if that's what everyone else does, what the heck do you look for of someone in your team to see if they're worrying about it?
I think the main thing is compulsion. I think that when people are acting from compulsion, it really stands out. You can kind of feel it in the weirdest way. If people are being, I guess, authentic or feel relaxed, you can just tell the energy is different to, I'm not getting like all woo-woo, this like, just feel that kind of, it's kind of the other happy office, and one angry person walks in, you can feel the ripples of that. And I think it's just to work on that intuition of knowing what your team or team member would be like in normal times, what their base level is, and then you can kind of work out where they are. It said it's not rocket science. It's just about not being afraid to have those human to human interactions.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have had this conversation several times, I know, and it's like the difference between, is somebody just ambitious and that's why they're always pushing to be at the front, or is it that they're pushing to cover up something else?
Well, I mean, that could be lots of different things. But if you think about people like, I mean, taking it to kind of famous people like Robin Williams, Eric Morecambe, you've got lots of different kind of people that their mask is everything. And actually, it's when they take off that mask that they were really struggling. I think we know when people are, if you've ever been to an event, kind of change that, if you've ever been to an event where you have like a stage speaker who's trying to sell something, trying to sell, you get that kind of vibe, that just wait for it, like run to the back of the room now, it's $3,000 today. And it's the same with, so you know that's a mask, it's not authentic. And I think that's the reason why, I think authenticity shows, I think it really shines through. It's the same reason why I've decided to, I mean, completely trust the room, because I've worked with you guys for a long time now, but I've decided to share, like, for the first time ever, that I'm not going to be doing this after this year. You know that was authentic. You know that was, because I was thinking it through as I was saying it. I think it's kind of like a script. If you've got a scripted sales call, people have got these like scripts that they run on for different situations. Have those human conversations. I was trying to go somewhere with that. Was that rambling? I don't know.
So much like as usual, mate, you started talking, ended up somewhere we didn't know was going, but that's fairly standard for you, mate, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I just tell you right off. I don't know where I was going with that. However, for me, it's just,
right. Nobody. Surely this is where everyone is at right now. Don't quite know where they're going.
There is. I mean, like I said, there's no one fixable. There is something I've used with teams I've worked with before. It's called the weekly check-in. Now, I'm not sure if I'll happily send it's not very detailed, but it's just a graph of things that I use. So I get people that I've worked with, maybe as mentor or something like that, I get them to check in on different areas of their personal and professional lives and score out of 10. So over a period of maybe 8 weeks plus, you start to get a really good picture of where they are. Also, they have to put like a word or a couple of words explaining what the score is. If anybody, so 10 being great, if I said to you, right, how is your home life right now? And somebody said 10, great, that's excellent, brilliant. That will go unquestioned because it's just good to know that. But if they said it was like 5, anything below 6, I would then start to ask questions about. So it's not questions as in, what's wrong with you? kind of thing. You will start to have these kind of conversations. Oh, I noticed you marked out of 6, so what's going on there? And actually that kind of silence creates a vacuum. And people will feel, if you don't feel the silence, other people will. So that tool over a period of time will give you an average score out of 100 for how anybody is at any one time. So you can actually statistically keep an eye on where they are as well.
Really good.
Thanks, Jim.
I have a question. Hello. I thought that was really great. So thanks so much for sharing all the information and just kind of understanding a bit more about the anxiety and how people are affected differently by it. I work with a lot of temporary staff and as I work for an agency, so sometimes we can be the person they turn to talk to, which is great. You mentioned a lot about signposting, so a lot of our clients have internal signposting, but could you share maybe some really great places to signpost people to rather than the obvious ones maybe?
Sure, definitely. Mine, obviously, I said they got an urgent help. Mental Health UK, Time to Change. There are industry-specific ones, depending on what industry you're working in. So construction, I work with Mates in Mind. With law, it's Law Care. So again, if you wanted to drop me an email, I will kind of send you over some links and stuff. And anybody who wants to drop me an email, I'll send you over some links. If you can let me know what industry you're in, I can also do some research on that as well.
That'd be great, thank you.
But even on a local level, so I'm based just north of Bristol, so people like Off the Record, so Off the Record in Bristol do great work, but they fly largely under the radar because it's an independent organisation. So it's knowing organisations like that as well who can act. I also say it's having that kind of network of trusted professionals around you as well. I could not have done what I've done over the past 3 years without having trusted kind of advisors and mentors and people around me, like Leanne you're hearing from tomorrow, and like lots of different people that I've also referred to. Because as somebody who's not a solution provider, if I'm raising this stuff with people, then my responsibility is then where do I go with that? So having those trusted people that I can refer to as well really helps. So it's not just about organizations, it's getting familiar and striking up good relationships with people that could be counselors or therapists or psychologists or things like that as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else for any questions?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Hi, if you identify, so I'm not managing anybody, but I work in a similar role to Holly. If you identify that somebody is maybe struggling with their anxiety, what's the best way to open up a conversation? Because sometimes just saying, how are you isn't going to get it very far.
No, you're quite right, thank you. So mental health, I think it's Mental Health UK did a great campaign called Ask Twice. So you've got far more chance of getting an answer on the second question. There is an element of using silence. I mean, for Stu and Em, who's been to the Speaking Academy I run, the silence bit is really powerful. That if you use kind of proactively, if you use silence in questioning, somebody has to feel that. And if it's not you, it will be the other person. It's a really kind of great brain hack kind of thing, I guess. So for me, there's that. The problem you have is that the closer you are to somebody, the harder it is to help them.
Yeah.
So, and again, confidentially, I'll kind of share this with you. If you look at my niece, who's 10, she struggles with anxiety, but she just sees me as Uncle Nick. So she'll watch my YouTube stuff. She knows what I speak about and that kind of stuff. However, she just sees me as Uncle Nick, and I would never want that to change either, if I'm honest. So the best way for me to engage her was I bought the illustrated version of the Chimp Paradox, which is called My Inner Chimp by Professor Steve Peters. Now, by giving her something that she could engage with herself, you kind of empower people to develop as opposed to tell them. You find that a lot with partners and people that you live with as well. Really difficult because they see you as your husband, your wife, your whatever that may be, not as a solution. So in real life, when we're doing this in person, I would give out a lot of materials that you could just leave around or give to somebody, say your husband, for example, or partner, and say, right, okay, I saw this guy chatting about this today, what do you think? So it's kind of like you're just raising it conversationally. So that kind of conversational signposting is really powerful the closer your relationship is to people.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries. I think for me, that's why I try to merge personal development and mental health is to get to see people. Actually, mental illness is a whole world different from mental health. That could be very easily lumped in together. And mental health, like I said, we all have. So that's the bit that we should actively work on to the best we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Freya. If anyone has any other questions, please do reach out. Given the sensitivity of the subject, sometimes it can be quite difficult to ask open questions. So thank you for those who have.
Thank you. So the recording will be available. I'll get that out to everybody so they can pass it on to people maybe if they want to as well within their teams or anything like that. And not sure if any of you are registered for tomorrow with Leanne from Beam Training, but the link is on the website and on LinkedIn as well. And if anyone needs anything, then again, just email me at info@coolnorthwest.org.uk. Thanks again, Nick. Absolutely fantastic.
No worries. I'll just say to Lillian, I've just going to screenshot your email address and I'll drop you that later on this afternoon. Thank you.
Cool. Bye then.
Really great.